Hey, everybody out there, it's Friday afternoon. Cinema Crusaders is back, and we are here to talk about a movie from 1985. We're doing a tribute both this week and next week to the late, great Paul Reubens, or I believe his full name was Paul Rubenstein, better known to many as Pee Wee Herman, who recently passed away this week at the age of 70. May he rest in peace. I hope he is finding the rest and comfort that he deserves. Turns out he had been battling cancer for over 6 years and hadn't shared that until right at the end with his fans. So it is a sad day that he passed away, but we are going to celebrate his career this week with Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And next week, we are going to be watching another one of his movies, Mystery Men. He was in that with many other people. But before we get to that, I want to introduce you to my fellow Cinema Crusaders who are going to help me talk about this film. First, he is a writer for Omen Comics and also the Revelation imprint for Omen Comics. He's part of the OCPN broadcast and also does sloppy spoilers at times, and is a writer for Blood World, writing the Inquisitorium, which will be coming to light soon in the medium future. But that is a whole thing out in the future, because right now I need to bring him in at this moment. He is a D&D player extraordinaire. I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Not too bad. I will say that with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, this was a movie that I kind of remember watching a little bit as a kid and just not really feeling it. I just found the character kind of annoying. That's nothing to say that, Paul Reubens did a bad job. I think he did a really great job playing the character. The movie I didn't think for the longest time was for me. Going back and watching it, though, I just see how weird this movie is. And I can see some appreciation for what it does, even if I'm not necessarily the audience for the character.
I agree with that. We're going to get into that. And this movie is also foundational for a bunch of stuff that came later. And we're going to talk about that as well, because this movie launched some careers in a number of different fields. So, we're definitely going to hit on that. But before we do that, I'm going to bring in a filmmaker in his own right. He's also a writer, creator of comic books, including The Big Book of Bob Volume 1, and also which features Bob Non-Union Psychic. And he's got a number of award-winning films out there, including Waiting for Legros, which is out right now, The Unmentionables, Hunting for Fish. The list goes on. They are too numerous to mention because he is that prolific as a creator. I'm talking about none other than the man behind Warehouse 9, Lance Lucero. How you doing, Lance?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this one. I mean, we're talking about an entertainment icon, a guy that was able to showcase and maintain a single character for like decades. This is something unheard of, and you have like an Elvira who comes from the Groundlings as well. But when you are a Cassandra Peterson who plays an Elvira, but when you really look at cinematic history, he is very hard to beat. It's very, very hard to beat what Paul Reubens did with Pee-wee. This character, television, theater, film, books, records. Cartoons. This guy is a model. You look at him and you think, how did he do it? This is the way people should try to do it. It's a one-of-a-kind thing.
I think, and this is just me spitballing here, but, I think that he got a lot of great career advice from some people around him, along with another one of his fellow cast members, which is Cassandra Peterson, which is, when you strike gold and you have a character, don't feel upset that people want to keep seeing the character that you made famous. Go with it. You can still do other things, but hitting gold and being lucky to be in the right place at the right time doesn't happen all the time. So don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And
Absolutely.
Both of them have taken that to heart. Cassandra Peterson with Elvira, and then Paul Reubens with Pee-wee. So.
Absolutely. And think about it. It was only 2016 when we had our last Pee-wee movie, and he still looked pretty good.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. And then I am going to bring in a man. He is an artist and writer. He is a D&D player as well with me. but you know him best for Mr. Happy and Symbols of Liberty. He's also working on Blood World right now. He's part of Sloppy Spoilers, and of course, he is a huge part of the Cinema Crusaders team. I'm talking about none other than Jeff Baresi. How you doing, Jeff?
I know you are, but what am I?
That's
Yeah.
only one.
Let's see.
Keep going and going.
You probably were, yes, Mike.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I never knew the name of that particular song or that piece of music was Tequila. I didn't even know there were words to it for forever. My exposure to Pee Wee Herman went way back to the 70s with his cameo introductions in the Cheech and Chong movies, where I did get to see his stand-up, and in subsequent films he had cameo roles as like a little side character who would pop in here and there, and he was absolutely brilliant at the time. It was funny because it was an adult comedy style film, and like anybody who is aware of like Pee Wee's Playhouse and would go back and watch Pee Wee dropping F-bombs of just like their hair would curl. And then following that, I saw the amazing HBO special of what would become Pee Wee's Playhouse, but it was based off some really funny adult comedy about a kid who had a dream about flying. And I think you're right that Elvira gave him some really good advice about maintaining a popular character, and he rode that throughout his career. Now he did other things, of course, but that's who we we love him as Pee Wee Herman, and loved him in things like Murphy Brown, loved him in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but there's something so iconic about Pee Wee Herman, this lovable semi-innocent man-child. He's this combination of innocence and then the petulance of a child at the same time, and it's just it's funny because he does dress like an adult, but he acts like a child, and he's got those rosy cheeks painted on, and it kind of gives you an excuse as an adult to just be a little carefree and have a little fun. He kind of gives you permission to do that when you watch Pee Wee.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I will also say that both he and Cassandra Peterson also jealously guarded their characters as well, and didn't let people infringe. I mean, and they were very careful with what they did with those characters. And so, without going to Cassandra Peterson and focusing on Pee Wee, I know that Pee Wee got invited to do a whole host of things. Paul Reubens did with the Pee Wee character that he turned down. And when Pee Wee became a children's character, he guarded that image as well.
Yeah.
So
I respect and applaud the fact that neither of them hoard out their characters.
Yeah.
That they maintain strict control. And I've seen over the course of enjoying media for a very long time the lament of many a creator who let loose of their creation, from the creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Mike Judge. George Lucas. Oh, geez. Mike Judge spending years patiently building up his finances to the point where he could buy Beavis and Butthead back. You gotta, these things.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, they're precious. Because I understand you never know what's going to be a hit, and you're that young starving artist, and you're looking to do something with it. And I remember, like with my own character, a lot of people are fans of Mr. Happy. And they're like, "Oh man, you ought to." Like back when Walmart had the smiley face thing, oh, you ought to sell that to Walmart. It's like, I'd never sell it. Never. I don't care how much money. I'll lease it to them, but there's no selling. That's mine, suckers.
Absolutely. Protecting your intellectual property is the mainstay of today.
Mm-hmm.
Not
for all the money in the world.
Absolutely. Not for all the money in the world.
For $1 billion trillion.
$1 trillion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that all goes back to, I want to keep this focus on Paul Reubens, but that goes back to something that I learned when I did the Cassandra Peterson interview, which was she got in a huge fight with the previous hostess of that show called Vampira, and she got
Yep.
sued numerous times.
Yep.
Yeah,
And,
Vampira always felt like Elvira stole her bit.
Yeah, and you can fall on that wherever you may, but I think that Elvira took that to heart, and then of course she was part of the Groundlings, along with a number of other famous,
Many.
very
That was
talented people.
a big generation of comedians came out of that. Phil Hartman, and Cheech and Chong. I mean, the list goes on that were involved in that comedy troupe at the time. Once again, like you said, timing was key, but these were really talented people. I mean, I'm sorry, you don't see it today. You don't see these people taking these risks.
And Phil Hartman was involved with this film as well.
Yeah, he wrote it. Like another SNL alum, Jan Hooks, has a small part of the Alamo. So
I think that and I do want to get into the movie in just a second, but I will say that as we're making some opening comments, looking at the cast and crew of this film and the people who are behind the music, Danny Elfman, the directing, Tim Burton, and a number of others, it really made me realize that as far as big as Hollywood is, how small Hollywood is, and these people had personal relationships and careers were started off of this, and those personal relationships were there, and they kept working with each other over the years, So
I mean, that's one of the things I do like about certain creators in Hollywood, like Tim Burton, who took a risk after Pee-wee's fall from grace of casting Paul as the father of the Penguin in that opening prologue of the second Batman film,
right.
And he just nails it.
Right.
And it made Pee-wee okay again. I just love his triumphant return on the MTV Movie Awards when he comes out and he asks the audience, "Have you heard any good jokes lately?"
And it's so funny. I forgot to laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty amazing that, there is a Hollywood connection there, like you said. I mean, there was an infrastructure and a circle of connection with the Groundlings, with Warner Brothers, and Kel Arts. So they were all kind of juiced into each other, knew each other. So that's when pooling your resources is beneficial rather than just looking at a list that a studio hands you to say these are the people that should be involved.
And I'll say this, and then definitely we're going to get in the movie now, but I will say that I contrast that with what's going on today, and I'm going to take a name out of the hat. James Gunn, who gets a lot of flack from people because he has a certain, and there's a lot of different directors out there who have actors that they are very comfortable working with, and they hire them a lot because they
Christopher Nolan and Cillian Murphy. How many movies have they made together?
Like Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. Like there's a long-standing relationship.
Clint Eastwood. Look at the same people he had in his movie for decades.
Yeah, and I'm like, I want to tell all these people who complain about this all the time, and people complain about everything on social media. Let's be honest, but it's like, this is part of being a professional, is that you grow these relationships and you know what you're going to get out of people and you know what they can bring. And it's like, instead of trying to hire the new flavor of the month all the time because they've got the most social media followers or something.
I hear it. I hear it from distributors now. While your actors are really great, but you need somebody that's a name. And I'm like, why? I got this guy here. I got this gal here. They're great. I know they'll know their lines. There's going to be no bullshit. We're going to have a great time. So why do I need to go out of my way? Well, that's just the way it's done.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Henry Cavill almost quit acting because he would keep nailing these auditions. But everybody says, "You're great, but like you're not a name." He's like, "Well, how am I ever going to get to be a name if I never get a bloody part?"
Yeah.
Right.
So, all right, let's break down this film. So, I'm just going to say right off the bat, breaking down the story of the film, it basically comes down to Pee Wee Herman is the man-child, and there are a whole host of cool visuals. He gets his bike stolen because he's in a fight with another man-child named Francis, and then the whole rest of the movie is his crazy adventure cross country to find his bike.
It's a road movie.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of great moments in between that are funny and everything. And that is basically the story, and we will get into more of the story as it comes naturally.
Man goes on a quest.
Yeah, but the whole point of the story is there to provide a backdrop, I think, for the great characters that have been come to life here, and there's a number of them. There's a number of people providing even small bit parts that are memorable, and they're very over the top in a way that only Tim Burton could bring to life.
Well, it's not just that. If you watch the film, like you have a narrative, you have a plot, you have a structure, you have characters you follow, you have arcs in there, but there's also I'd forgotten just how many sequences are just little comedy sketches, and you can tell this is coming from a group like the Groundlings, the whole Large Marge pit part, the bar, like the biker bar, like so many things are just like little sketches thrown into a movie, but it all works because this is a wacky world that they've created.
Well, even though, what do you remember? I remember the Alamo.
Yes.
So
they completely exaggerate that stuff, by the way, but you can kind of see, where the humor comes from with it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, and even pokes fun a little bit at Hollywood there at the end. And I want to get to the ending because I think that's one of the funniest parts for me. But let's talk about
no other movie in history will have Santa Claus, Godzilla, and Twisted Sister in the same scene.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let's talk about the man first, though, Paul Reubens. And I'm going to go to Lance first. Lance suggested this and brought it in. So I'm going to go to him. Talk to us a little bit about his performance in this film, what you saw, and then just a little bit about his career on a larger. And then I'm going to go around the horn to everybody after that. So
it was it's kind of strange because I knew of the character Pee Wee Herman like Jeff did going back to Cheech and Chong, and even bit parts like the dating game or whatever when he character. I mean, he was just always there media-wise for some reason. It's like, oh wow, I just saw him in a movie. Okay, here's that same character. And going back as a kid, I'm like, well, this guy's kind of dialed into something, and it's interesting. It's absolutely interesting. And
okay, yeah.
Yep. I mean, he's versatile, and that proves it. He's just not a comedian. I mean, the guy is a performer, and he knows how to perform, and he knows how to stay in character, which is absolutely an amazing thing to do, even during an interview, even during just a bit part. But he's staying in character as Pee Wee Herman, not as Paul Reubens. And it's an amazing thing that fascinated me, kind of like an Andy Kaufman. It's like this guy is not breaking character.
All right. Thank you for saying that because I was going to mention that before. He reminds me quite a bit of Andy Kaufman. So
yeah, I mean, those guys that are that committed, they're going to make it. And like I think I said before, 2016 was the last Pee-wee movie, and he looked pretty good, and he pulled it off still. That's a very difficult thing for a performer to do that has a character that's lasted over 30-something years. You know what I mean? But he was able to pull it off. He was able to stay in character. Now, that's commitment. That is dedication to your craft.
If he hadn't had just passed away, like that last Pee-wee movie on Netflix, you go like, I swear this guy hasn't aged a day. It's kind of astonishing.
We've lost something special because he's still beyond Pee Wee Herman had a lot to offer. And that's where it gets a little heartbreaking, but it's going to happen. It's just, he had more to offer.
I have to ask you the question then. And I'm going to be right up front and say, when I first saw this movie as a kid, I'm like Steve. I'm like, I don't get it, and it's like Pee Wee himself, there's parts I find funny and there's parts I find grating on me. But I understand it. And as I've gotten older, I've appreciated a lot more of it. But what about Pee Wee to you was so appealing? Like, I want to hear it from both you and Jeff, because I think that even for someone who is like that, Pee Wee is not the greatest thing that you love. You can appreciate the character that he brought to life. I mean, and honestly, I will say this right up front. I thought the guy who played Francis was the perfect foil to Pee Wee.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Francis Buxton, because he's so
I mean, here's the weird thing about this. I missed the Pee Wee's Big Adventure when it was released theatrically. Believe it or not, I knew the film existed. It fell under my radar. And I saw Beetlejuice. And I was like, okay, this Tim Burton guy, he did Pee Wee's Big Adventure. And then it was announced he was going to do Batman 89. And I thought,
You're like,
okay,
what?
what the hell is this? And Pee-wee's Big Adventure happened to be on network television. It was Channel 2. It was in the afternoon. It was weird. And I thought, all right, whatever. It's probably 1988. Beetlejuice had just come out. I said, I think I better watch this. This guy's going to be making the new Batman movie. And from the first 10 seconds, I was hooked. I was like, okay, why is this so good? Why am I buying this performance? He's all in. There's not a moment when he's Pee-wee that I feel he's truly just blatantly acting. He is that character.
He is Pee-wee, yeah.
And that's what sold me. I'm like, he is all in.
All right, I'm going to let you into my mind a little bit before I go to Jeff. One of the things that I found a little grating about this film back then, and even more so now, is that this movie is terrifying to me. It's absolutely terrifying.
I love that response.
Man children are terrifying to me. Evil children are terrifying to me. Clowns are terrifying to me. There are some evil clowns in this movie. Dolls are terrifying to me. That whole persona that he has.
Burton was slipping in every single horror thing he could get from his repertoire and put it in this movie and found ways to stick it in. And man, is it creepy.
Yeah.
It works. German expressionism.
Yeah, and watching
the classic scene in the rainy alleyway where his shadow is cast on there. That's so cast on Caligari.
But rewatching the movie this week for this thing here, there is a scene where he is having like a nightmare sequence where these clowns are operating on his bike. It's horrifying.
And Francis is dressed as the devil and all that. It's just amazing.
I've got to write a novel just to get this out of my head because it's so scary to me. So, I mean, I think that's part of it is like people are looking at this and then the TV show later as a kid's show. And I'm like, what are you talking about, kid's show? This is a horror movie. So,
right.
With that admission and
Large Marge, that thing was straight out of Stephen King.
Yeah. and I will say, we'll get a little bit more into this, but a lot of the filming locations I recognize from around where I live.
Yeah, there's a lot of California locations.
The Big Dinosaur is out there about 30 minutes from me, and all the other stuff. So
did you see how they repainted it?
And the Alamo is accurate. That is actually the place.
Yeah.
The dinosaur, they put Pee-wee suit on him.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool as a kid. And in fact, the scene where the rodeo, that is the LA County Fairgrounds out in Pomona. So yeah, that's kind of cool to see.
I was stationed in Texas, and I still can't find the damn basement to that Alamo.
I looked when I was there last year.
Now that I've
there is no basement in the Alamo. When Adam Ruby said that, I'm like, oh no, that's nonsense. Because I'd actually been there. I had been to the museum. I'm like, there is no basement there. I can tell you that.
Well, now that I've admitted that I need help,
I believe in Madam Ruby. I'm still looking.
Over to you, Jeff. What about this performance in particular, and then Paul Reubens' career as a whole, attracted you so much?
Now, the interesting thing is having first seen him in Cheech and Chong, I've got to see. Yeah, I got to see him. His initial appearance, I believe, I think it was in Nice Dreams. He's on. Okay, it's Up in Smoke. Okay, he's on stage as a performer, as a comedian. He's doing his show. And then later on, he's hanging out with them in the club, being Paul Reubens, still dressed in the Pee-wee. So, I didn't really connect with him as the character then. But it wasn't until, the subsequent films, he's doing his own little character. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. You're getting a little flavor of Pee-wee. But it was the HBO special that I really got it, because it's like Lance says, Paul Reubens is not a comedian. He's not a traditional comedian. He's not like a Bobcat Goldthwait who did have a character that he performed on stage. But he's still a comedian. He's still telling jokes. He's still doing this. Pee-wee had a theatrical experience that he was offering you. He was offering you these characters. And I totally bought into it. What kid doesn't want to fly? What kid doesn't want a magical house full of all these things? Back when we used to grow up with shows, like Mr. Green Jeans and with
Claire stuff.
Yeah, Puff and Stuff, Mr. Rogers,
see?
Clarabelle the Clown, all of those things.
Mr. Puff and Stuff is horrifying as well. It scared the hell out of me as kids.
Oh, you guys are so weird to be afraid of stuff like that.
That was our era, man. That was you're all in or you go home.
And I just fell in love with that character, like because you knew kids like that or you were like kids like that. It's obviously super exaggerated, but there was something.
Yeah.
You guys are such scaredy cats.
Cherry scared you.
You guys like the chair's gonna eat you. Well, there's actually a horror movie about a chair that eats people. But I'm sure Mike knows about that. But the
bed that eats. Yeah,
there's that one too. I just really got into it, and like there's something about that character I really connected with, and I love how that particular special ended, where Pee-wee's wish is granted by all of his friends coming together to convince the genie. And you want to talk about his range as a performer. He's been this sarcastic little, he's a fun kid, but he's also like a little bit of a bastard in a way. He's putting mirrors on his shoes. He's doing all these, raunchy things. My favorite bit is the Dr. Mongo bit where he's hypnotizing Joan. But at the end, I believe he's that little boy when he's flying. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it. When he's got the little puppet behind. He's like, look, boys and girls, I'm flying. And I really feel that excitement and that exuberance and that innocence, that wonder. And I was like, wow, I'm really invested in this. And this carries over into this movie for me. So for me, this movie was not a hard sell at all. And I love Tim Burton's visuals. I can go back and watch this movie again and again and keep looking for all the really interesting set dressings. I love all the Rube Goldberg kind of stuff that goes on in there. The way the bike is put together, everything that Tim Burton tends to do is a visual treat, especially in the early days when he was really going gonzo out of things. So and Pee-wee fits in that world. It's like somebody took Dr. Seuss and just dropped it in your neighborhood.
See, Dr. Seuss can be scary too. I will freely admit that I was.
No wonder you write horror. You're scared of everything.
Young child. Yeah. And honestly, when you were doing the Pee-wee voice, you showed me something earlier this week where Pee-wee was in a Halloween H2O trailer. To me, that makes perfect sense because I can see Pee-wee with these Rube Goldberg machines going, "Look, Mr. Knife, we're going to carve into the gentleman now."
I really love the scene where Tim Burton accosts him in the raining alley, and he's like, "We don't like strangers around here," and he's like, "Yeah," they all flee.
Yeah. Exactly. So I have to admit that yes, I go to those deep and dark places, but that's part of.
He's the acceptable man child.
It's the allure of Tim Burton and Pee Wee Herman. I mean, it can mean many things to different people. It's just I take it to a dark place, which I know is going to surprise everybody out there that knows me.
If you showed me a modern day movie with a man child in it, I'd be oh God, I can't stand this character. I wish they'd go away. But Pee-wee is the acceptable man child because
and I think the idea too of the world being a scary place. Mm-hmm. It is a scary place, and he's on a road trip adventure to reclaim his prized possession.
I will also say that
he encounters a lot of things that should scare us.
Pee-wee listened to Robert Downey Jr.'s character from Tropic Thunder before that character had even been conceived, and I won't say the line because I don't want us to get canceled, but you never go full, and you know what I was going to say. Or do you know? Have you seen Tropic Thunder?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He's the dude playing the dude, pretending to be the dude.
Yeah, but you never go full.
We tie.
Yeah. All right. So, with that, now that we've been canceled off of everything.
Carlos Mencia used to say, dee.
Yeah. Let's go to Steve Shadewig Sellers. What was your thoughts on Paul Reubens' performance as Pee-wee in this? But Paul Reubens' career from a larger perspective as well. And we're, to everybody out there, yes, we're talking a lot about Paul Reubens, and this is supposed to be Pee-wee, but Paul Reubens was Pee-wee, and this is a celebration of his life today. So, bear with us. We're going to talk about some other stuff in a minute.
That character was a big part of his life for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, even on various things that he done, Pee Wee's Playhouse, when he started making it a kids show and all of those things. Um, yeah, Tim Burton movies look like Tim Burton movies. Yeah, there's a definite stylistic influence.
He has a
that
style,
is there.
just like Sam Raimi has a style. So
yeah.
Same with Danny Elfman. I mean, you absolutely, when you hear like the music, this is a Tim Burton movie. So yeah, I'm with you on that. No, as for Reubens, I mean, this is somebody that I remember having seen when the movie came out. I think I first saw it like on home video a little bit later. Maybe it was like on Showtime or something like this. And the character didn't really work for me when I saw it, but at the same time, I never held that against Paul Reubens, particularly when I would see him in things later. Particularly things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he's the vampire. And it's like, yeah, these are completely different characters. This is somebody who had a lot of range as an actor, and put everything that he was into the role. You can respect that. Like, even if it was a character that didn't really appeal to me, you can definitely see that this is somebody who really was completely invested in his craft, worked to improve his craft constantly, and lived his act, to quote The Prestige. That I think is the thing with Pee Wee Herman. He was living his act, in a very real way. There is a part of him, a strong part of him, that resonated with Pee Wee, and he made it work for years and years and decades. And not many people were able to do that, and you got to respect that. I mean, this is a character that lasted a long time and that people still think fondly of now. So, you got to give him props to that.
I also have to say about Paul Reubens that the man was, as Lance pointed out, was so much more than Pee Wee, though. Even though Pee Wee was his major, was his bread and butter for many years, the fact that he could do so many things and fit into it seamlessly. I remember watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I liked that movie quite a bit. And I remember the first time I watched it in the theaters, and I'm watching the credits go by, and then I see, the vampire, and it says Paul Reubens. I'm like, get the hell out of here. That was Paul Reubens.
Yep.
And then I had to go back and I rented it and watched it again, and I was like, wow, and then you see him in Mystery Men. Then you see him, and the man was truly a talent, and that he could become. I'm gonna make a comparison, and I don't think that it's a stretch. He was almost Peter Sellers like in his ability to become any kind of character and become that character.
Now you say something interesting there, because revisiting the Mystery Men the other night with the special features, and they're doing like the featurettes and the behind the scenes. Paul Reubens, when he was being interviewed as the Spleen, he was the Spleen. He was not himself. He stayed in character for the interview. And I thought, this dude is committed. He is all in. And that's what you want in a performer. There are times where it may be a little annoying when they take it to an extreme, but he was all in. And that's who you want on your side, man. That's who you recruit. That's oh no, I need this person.
Not only does that go back to Andy Kaufman, but that actually goes back to Tropic Thunder. Robert Downey Jr. has this great line when he says, like, "Oh man, I don't break character until we're doing the commentary on the Blu-ray or the DVD."
Right.
Yeah. But and this is this not to take away from other great actors, but I mean, let's be honest. When you got Michael Caine playing a character, it was Michael Caine playing a character, and he always brought it, and he did it very well. But there was no disguising the fact that was Michael Caine. Or the same thing with Sean Connery. Doesn't matter what Sean Connery is playing; it was Sean Connery playing that character.
Yeah, let's face it. There are certain actors who've made a career out of being themselves for a great number of roles: Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, Sean Connery. But there are other people who just absolutely, there are people who just disappear into a role.
Right, and the Peter Sellers thing is a great comparison because it's
Gary Oldman, I would say, is another one that is in the Reubens camp. Like when you see him all these various roles that he's doing, he is a chameleon. Yeah. He slips into them. Reubens does the same thing.
I'm going to go back to Lance in just a second, but on the Peter Sellers bit. But we did another movie, Murder by Death,
Yep.
Peter Sellers plays a character in there. If you didn't know it was him, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's when the ego is set aside. It's like, no, it's the character. It's not about the star.
Yeah.
To immerse yourself is something. Now, not every role can create that for a performer. Not every franchise can create that for a performer. Like, for instance, a Tom Cruise is a Tom Cruise in all these Mission Impossible movies. And Ethan Hunt is just a name to me. It means nothing as far as a character. Even a Maverick is Tom Cruise as a Maverick. Like Steve said, like Jeff said, I mean, there are those personalities that are performers versus immersiveness to say, nope, I'm going to put the makeup on, or I'm going to embarrass myself, or I'm going to do whatever I need to do to nail that performance.
Yeah.
There is no shame in comedy.
Yeah.
No.
And some people go too far with it. I will say that. Like, I'm going to put a name out there. Jared Leto tries to be method, and he goes crazy with it. But to his credit, Joaquin Phoenix, Jared Leto, to a lesser extent than Paul Reubens and Peter Sellers, can get into character as well. So I do have to give them that. So.
Right, and then the whole idea though of the method, having to study certain aspects of performers, method, reactionary, living in the moment, all these things that a performer may need to tell themselves to get there. Now, really, I don't care how you get there. I'm supposed to help you get there, but it's really up to you to get there. And I'll tell you whether or not I like or dislike it, or if it fits in the pantheon of what I'm doing. But tell yourself whatever you need to tell yourself to get there. But I also think people use it as kind of a fake shield. Yes, it's like, okay, I get it. The Joker is a character, but you're not really the Joker. So get over yourself.
Exactly.
It's about emotion.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's interesting you say that, because Mike asked this question: is method the preference when looking for actors? And I think Lance just answered that, which is that I think that what you said is just get there. However you get there, get there. So
right. And however a person is trained, however a person feels they need to what they need to resource to get to that character, to me, is their problem. I give them everything they need, but it's up to them to ultimately create it. And when it is created, it's out of my hands. It's, even though it's on the page, here it is, I wrote it down. What do you mean you don't get? All right.
As long as it's not going to be disruptive on the set. And I think that's one of the advantages Reubens had here, is he'd already been doing Pee-wee for a while, so he just slips on this character like a glove.
Like a glove. You're right. And as far as preference goes, once again, I don't look at a performer's resume in a sense. I look at their audition. I look at what they're doing right now in front of me. I don't have a preference on how a person gets there. I've discussed it loosely, but over time, it's no longer a discussion of the school of whatever or how you're doing it. It just isn't a discussion. It's like, here's the character. Let's bring it to life. And that's where the collaborative effort comes in, and that's where it's fun. So, man, it must have been a treat to work with a Paul Reubens, man. That's a missed thing for me. I'd have no chance of even securing him. But the point is it would have been genius just to be in the room with him.
absolutely.
Yeah, I dearly wish I could have just briefly met him at a con one year or something. But it, never have that interaction now.
Right.
Now, I do want to get into a couple of other things towards the end of the film, and I want to talk a little bit about what they did with the ending. But I don't want to get short shrift to the other members of the cast, and there are a lot of people that do great stuff.
So many great cameos and character actors in this.
Yeah, and I'm going to let us go around real quick and just quickly highlight one person, because there are so many we could talk about. For me, though, I'm going to pick one out that I saw this week that I didn't realize, it was a little strange for me. Francis's butler.
Yes.
At
Oh,
first,
you didn't recognize that was Professor Torrey?
That was Odd Job.
No, and at first I thought it was Odd Job. I thought it was Odd Job. It's not. He played Sub-Zero though in The Running Man, but he looks just like Odd Job. I was like, is that Odd Job?
Mhm.
And I had to go
Totally
back and
Odd
check.
Job.
But he's the guy who played
Like,
Sub-Zero.
I believe his name is Professor Torrey.
No,
Tanaka.
just plain Zero.
Yeah,
Professor.
Yep. And yeah, he's great. And I think he showed up in God. What else did he show?
He's
Last
been in a
Action
million
Hero.
different
That's right. He
things.
was in Last Action Hero. He's a bunch of
Perfect
stuff.
Weapon with Jeff Speakman.
Yeah.
He's a henchman of a 80s caliber.
Yeah, I mean, and there are a bunch of those guys, and it made me smile because there are a bunch of those guys in the '80s. For whatever reason, they showed up in a lot of like martial arts movies, but you recognize them. They were in everything, you know,
Did
and
you,
they were always the bad guys in the movies, you know.
Did you spot Elvira in the movie? Because I didn't
Yes.
until I was
Yep,
going
I
through
did.
the cast list.
Yeah, she was the biker mama.
She's a biker
Yeah.
mama.
I did not realize that was her until I was like, "Holy cow!" Because
Another
you
guy.
forget that Cassandra's got red hair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before I pass it on to Steve, another guy that was like this that showed up in all these movies and you recognize him. I don't remember his name, but he's in Die Hard. He's the henchman who steals a candy as they're getting ready. He was also in Big Trouble in Little China, you know, a bunch of stuff. These guys showed up in all of these movies and TV shows all the time.
That would be Al Leong. He's a great stunt performer and martial artist.
Amazing stunt performer. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Steve. One of the other cast members that you want to highlight real quick. Anybody?
Yeah, the guy that played, I forget what his name was, but he was the criminal that was driving with him.
Judd Omen.
Pee-wee.
Judd
Omen.
Judd Omen
Yeah.
is Mickey Morelli.
I know that guy's face. He reminded me of Tim Morrison, but I knew it wasn't him. And then I remember where I seen him before. He was actually in Dune. He was one of the Fremen. Was in the, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he was very good in the limited time that he gets with Pee-wee. And you definitely, you know, he's very scary at first, and you can, and you know, and I love how Pee-wee just kind of looks at him, and it's like, yeah, what are you in for? Even Pee-wee, as naive as he is, it's like this guy is up to no good. He's doing some stuff.
But
and then it turns out, yeah, I tore off a tack from the mattress.
But that's one of the great things
so
about this movie is that in the limited time that all these different actors and actresses had, Tim Burton, I think, made a conscious choice to tell them, take the performance and take it to 12, you know? And it fit the tone of the movie, and they were all incredibly talented in the little bits and pieces that they had.
That's Everett McGill. They do look alike. Everett McGill was in Dune.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
And I just was like, that. Wait a minute, I got confused. So yeah that was.
All right. Lance, I'm going to go to you next. A person that was in the movie that you want to highlight. So
I'm going to highlight James Brolin and Morgan Fairchild.
Yeah, those are kind of easy. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's easy. I know.
But it's so great.
But the thing is when I didn't know they were in the film when I first saw it. And when they were reenacting his movie version of Pee-wee, I bought it 100%. The hair, the makeup. And when he was fighting those ninjas, I said, okay, this is the right guy for Batman. I said it. He's going to make a great Batman film. That sequence of James Brolin sold me on Tim Burton. I was like, because I wasn't a real big Beetlejuice fan. I was an instant Pee-wee fan. And now he's doing Batman. That sold me. I said, he's going to do a good Batman film. It's going to be great.
And that's the thing is that just because one thing doesn't completely resonate with you doesn't mean you can't be a fan of their work. Like
Right.
I'm a huge Beetlejuice fan, but I have the same feelings about Tim Burton's work in Beetlejuice that I do in Pee-wee, which is it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying.
There's Christopher Nolan films I love. There's Christopher Nolan films I don't care a whit about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And real quick, Judd Omen, he was in Dune as well, though. He played Jameis in Dune. So
Did he play
okay.
Okay, there you go.
And remember the main villain that killed Patrick Swayze in Red Dawn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That's him.
Yeah. I got him confused with Everett McGill. I thought they looked.
What an interesting pedigree.
Yeah.
All right. It's the 80s, man.
Yeah. So and those were really. I mean, Jameis was kind of a small part, but it was
Well, Jameis
memorable.
I'm pretty sure, like I don't know if they ever filmed it, but we know from the sci-fi Dune and the current Dune that's being out, Jameis was supposed to have a duel with Paul Atreides, where Paul first kills somebody. So
Yeah.
that probably ended up on the cutting room floor, because
Well,
I think the original cut of the film was like 3.5 hours.
In the David Lynch, or
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
He does kill Jameis in that movie. So
Yeah.
Paul Atreides. So,
I don't recall them. Okay, he did have the duel with him. That's right.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
they
he
took
did.
his water. So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, Jeff, member of the cast in the film.
All right, I'm gonna go with 3.
Okay.
First, Large Marge is
Yes.
everything she should be. That lady, you talking about taking the performance up to 12, and she just had a ball with that. She just absolutely had a ball. I was like, okay, I've got like a minute and a half of screen time, and I'm just going to get every ounce of cool out of this that I can. And she sells it. She sells it so well. And you know something weird's going on, and you know it's just wonderful. It's one of the most talked about scenes in the film, as a matter of fact. So, and you know, a lot of that's got to fall on her shoulders, as well as Tim Burton's animation for the scene when we see what she looked like. The next one I got to go with, as I've got to go with, oh geez, what's her last name now? It's E.G. something. It's Elizabeth.
E.G. Daily.
E.G. Daily, who you may or may not know has she's not just an actress, but she's also a singer. And she's outside of Pee-wee's Adventure. She does a lot of voice acting, including Buttercup for the Powerpuff Girls.
She's a voice,
Tommy on Rugrats. Like her voice is all over the place. I always thought she was just absolutely adorable.
You know what movie that I fell in love with her in, and I loved her singing in it as well?
What's that?
Better Off Dead.
Better Off Dead.
Oh, Better Off Dead. Yes.
She was on stage, but then, you know, I mean, she's 80s icon. Let's just say it. It's Valley Girl. It's Better Off Dead. It's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I mean, there's plenty more, but she was huge in the 80s.
Yeah. You know, she's like, for me, she was kind of like right up there with like that made my little heart flutter in the way that Christy McNichol used to back in the 80s as well.
Oh yeah. Now we're dating ourselves, but yes.
But
because we couldn't date Christy McNichol, but you know, that's a whole.
And the third one I've got to bring up is, like, I'm going to show my extreme FX nerdiness here, is that suit fabricator Cleve Hall, a Hollywood industry guy. He actually had a brief sci-fi show detailing his operation as a foam fabricator. He makes a lot of monster suits. He made the Godzilla suit and the Ghidorah in the end sequence. He plays a biker in the bar, but he's also in the Godzilla suit for all of those scenes. And his show used to be called Monster Man on Sci-Fi. Look it up if you want to see him and his weird family do FX, because I am a huge fan of practical effects. And I learned a lot of tricks just looking at his stuff, like how to build cool monster stuff out of foam and other things that you can find around your house or get, for pretty cheap.
Now that you brought up E.G. Daily, though, I think we're going to have to eventually do one of those movies, you know, Better Off Dead or One Crazy Summer. Or
Better Off Dead. All those John Cusack movies are great from back then.
Yeah. So, yeah, those were classics. So
I want my $2.
And I love Bobcat Goldthwait in the Godzilla costume with the cigar stuck in his mouth as he crushes everything in front of the Japanese guy. So you got to see it, folks. I'm not doing it justice. It's absolutely hilarious. So, all right. So now that we got, we talked about the cast and everything, I want to talk a little bit about two names that are going to become huge in Hollywood that get their starts right here in this movie. And I'm going to start with Jeff and go around the horn on it. And those two names are Tim Burton and
it's got to be the composer, Danny Elfman, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So up until this point, 1985, so they probably filmed this in 1984. To me, Danny Elfman was the front man for Oingo Boingo. And being from Southern California, it was huge, but it was huge everywhere. So
for those of you who don't know, the biggest hit they probably had was Weird Science.
Yep.
Or Dead Man's Party.
Dead Man's Party.
Gray Matter. Gray Matter. Which one is it?
Yeah, Gray Matter.
I sing both Dead Man's Party and Weird Science at karaoke.
If you ever want to get a little skeeved out, listen to their song "Little Girls." Does not age well, but I'm just going to leave it at that. But great band. And then Danny Elfman would go on to become iconic. And he's actually
he'd only ever scored. He did a film of his own before this.
Yeah,
he had his own production. This weird kind of Dante's Inferno kind of film. I forget the name of it off the top of my head.
I think his niece is actress Jenna Elfman. So
Forbidden Zone.
Zone. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead. Go.
But this is the film that really takes his career off, and it's like you guys have said. He has his own really distinct individual sound. There's a bombacity, a pomp and circumstance to what he does, but he also knows how to be subtle when you look at things like The Nightmare Before Christmas and all the beautiful music in there.
Well, not only that, you look at, from a music standpoint, the other things that he scored, like Men in Black, the opening title sequence that he did with that is fantastic. He did, I'm blanking on it now, but I mean, so many different things. He's the one that wrote Batman the Animated Series theme. All right.
Yeah, which came directly off the Batman the movie theme that he did.
I mean, that's Danny Elfman. It doesn't sound like anything else that he's done until you listen more closely. So,
and so many things. And that him and Burton had a falling out during Nightmare, the Nightmare Before Christmas, because he wanted to enact the voice of Jack Skellington, but that went to the really wonderful actor Chris Sarandon instead. And that caused them to have a divide for many years before they finally got back together and started working together again.
I will also say, for all of you who didn't live in the 80s in Southern California, I'm sad that you missed out on every Halloween. Oingo Boingo would put on a Halloween concert here in Southern California, and I got to go to 2 of them.
Sweet.
Amazing.
So jealous.
Absolutely amazing. So just one of those things that growing up in the 80s, and growing up in the 80s in Southern California was amazing because, we had Motley Crue at the Whiskey a Go-Go and everything, but, we could talk about that another time. Of course, time. So.
Tim Burton, we know, like he was Cal Arts, animator at Disney. He did little films for Disney like Frankenweenie, and I forget his animated feature. Vincent, that's the one that really got him
Vincent was noticed. First, and then it was Frankenweenie with Shelley Duvall, and then Pee-wee landed right in his lap.
Yeah. And I love the fact that because
he almost got Gremlins at one point.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, I know the other movie I wanted to talk about with real quick. I'm sorry, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman doing the score, which is another great film, Sleepy Hollow. Johnny Depp is in it as well.
Yeah. So, Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah, and they the thing I love about Burton is he never forgot his animator's roots. And he would do art pieces and character designs, like he was designing the look for the Joker when they were doing Batman, but he really brought stop motion animation back, and because of him doing movies like The Corpse Bride and others, it gave again Hollywood like, oh, stop motion animation can sell again. So we started to get things like Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings, and all these other wonderful stop motion animation films. It brought that lost art back, and people are enjoying it again.
I'm going to go to Steve here in just a second, but I'm going to throw a comment out there. Before we came on air, we were talking about style, artistic style, but we were talking about it in physical things. But this is style as well. This is something I think that is missing in modern Hollywood, where people have a style, and whether you like the style or you don't like the style, you can respect that people have a certain style, and they're bringing something to life. Just like noir is a style. I like noir. Not everybody likes it, and that's fine. But
a lot of people, even modern, and it's like nails on a chalkboard to me when they refer to noir as a genre.
Yeah.
No, it's a style. It's a shooting style. It's not a genre. So you hear people that just blurt it out there. Well, my genre is noir. Okay, so you shoot that style, but
it's also a writing style as well. So
it is a writing style, but it's not.
Yeah, they're really thinking hard-boiled mysteries is what they're thinking.
I bet they don't know what chiaroscuro is.
Right. And one of the most, just to share real quick, I somebody reviewed my book and they said that it was cliched in that it was the noir style. But I was like, the fact that you knew that I was writing noir style is probably one of the nicest things.
And I'll disagree. Thoroughly reading your book, I'll disagree with that criticism.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think so.
Good compliment, trust me.
Okay, Steve, on to
Yes.
you on Tim Burton and
Danny
Danny
Elfman.
Elfman.
Danny Elfman. Man, my brain is going. So
Yeah, I will say really quickly something that I had noticed with this movie I thought was really interesting that is vaguely related. When Pee-wee goes to Francis's house, he goes and knocks on the door, and he knocks on it in a really weird way, and then you realize that one of the knocks is the theme to Pee-wee's Big Adventure
Yeah.
that Elfman composed. I'm like, that is genius.
Yeah, it's
that is
not,
great.
he's knocking in time with the music, which was great.
Yep. I think it's great. But I mean, that really kind of shows, like, and apparently Elfman had actually come up with the main theme, like right when he got hired. Like he had it in his head, like right when they kind of signed the paperwork and all of that.
But
he was that excited to do it, and so you can kind of tell, like, this is really Burton and Elfman really kind of starting everything off where they have all that verve and passion, and they're putting everything into it, and you can see all the creative energy that they put together. I mean, the thing is, it's not just that Burton has a style and Elfman has a style; it's that they have a shared style that comes together on the movies that they do together, and there's a unique identity that they have together because of that. And I think you can definitely see that not just in this movie, but Batman, Beetlejuice, a number of other movies that they've done to go there over the years.
I'm going to take a quick shot at modern composers here real quick and then turn it over to Lance. I think that's because Elfman was still composing music for movies in the traditional style, where the movie was supposed to go hand in hand with the action or the scenes that were going, or the music was going hand in hand with what was going on in the movie. And it took a lot of work. John Williams, I watched a lot of documentaries behind the scenes with him. He sat down with the raw footage and composed as he was watching it to time up his music.
That's the way you should do it.
With what's going on.
Yes.
Now, and here's where I'm going to take a shot. A Junkie XL, even a Hans Zimmer to a certain effect. They just compose whatever the hell they want to compose and throw it in there, and that's why it feels so discordant sometimes.
Then you end up having to edit the scene to the music.
Yeah,
which can be a problem because, as you film the music, you have a certain sort of pace you're looking for, like whether it's the director who's going to edit, or the director working with the editor, and then like all of a sudden, if you have to set the film to the music instead of the other way around, then that is going to just affect the choices that you make, and it might end up disrupting the narrative or the flow of the visuals.
And not only that, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there are behind-the-scenes documentaries for Star Wars, as example, but he did it for Superman and everything else, where they have the movie without audio playing in the background, so that as he's conducting the time of his symphony to what's going on in the movie as they're recording.
Right.
I mean, that is the sign of a true professional, and it just doesn't happen anymore. So, unfortunately, over to you, Lance. Sorry to go off on that little tangent. So,
well, banking off that, I mean, you look at how this fell into Tim Burton's lap, and how you can see it was appealing in the way of this is a resume piece, this movie. If you really look at it for a director, he gets to do a road movie. He gets to be in Texas. He gets to be in Arizona for the dinosaurs. He gets to survey his town of Los Angeles. He gets to be on the back lot of Burbank Studios, Warner Brothers. He gets to do beach blanket bingo. He gets to do Godzilla. He gets to do cowboys. He gets to do demented clowns. He gets to do German expressionism. All this stuff is a foreshadow for the next 10 years of his life. You see Beetlejuice in this. You see Batman in this. You see Edward Scissorhands in this. It was all like, this is my resume piece, and I'm going to show the studios, look, this is the vision I have for this other movie. I already did it here. I mean, talk about timing. Talk about being able to have this. Just, if this is the only movie he ever had in his catalog, it's immortal because it has all that in there. Comedy, ridiculousness.
I have to admit, I was a little disappointed with everything else that was going on that I didn't see like a Annette Funicello or Frankie Valli on the beach scene.
But
It could have clearly happened.
I think
it would have been so apropos.
I think the other thing you have to say though for both Burton and Elfman is that they didn't rest on their laurels on this. They took this and then worked hard. The two of them were prolific. And Danny Elfman was writing music and performing with Boingo for years and just took off. And same thing with Tim Burton. So
right, and when you watch like on this disc, you have the commentary. You have Paul Reubens, Tim Burton, and Danny Elfman commentary. And Danny Elfman uses the right word. I'm writing musical cues, not a soundtrack. This is where this cue fit into. When you say that word cue, that means it complements the visuals. It does not supersede the visuals. So I tell my composers, my last composers for Coiffier, Matt Herron, I need the musical cues for the pacing of the film. He got it. That's what it's about, complementing the film, but also enhancing it. I mean, he got to do 60s retro beach music. He got to do stomping Godzilla music. He got to do demented, scary clown stuff, circus stuff. He got to do Western music, style country. I mean, think about, once again, this is a resume piece. This hops into your lap. You can take this movie anywhere. I did this, and I'd be like, I'm sold. You're in.
Yeah, I think
it was a perfect
when
marriage.
you're calling this a resume piece, I hadn't thought about it before, but like, even though I'm not a fan of this film, Elfman really shines on the Tim Burton Willy Wonka soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because if you watch the movie, each time you see the Oompa Loompas, it's a different decade of music that they're performing. So you're talking about him stretching as a musician, going through all these different decades, showing like, I can do this, I know this, like I'm this well versed in musical history.
See, that's a whole other movie to talk about, and I think that movie fails because of the style. Because I just don't think that Tim Burton's style matches with that story.
Yeah, that's off the table.
So and for that, I got to put that on the producer. So you hired the wrong man to do the movie. Sorry, you just did. So
whereas a Pee-wee's Big Adventure, everybody was perfect for the job, from the director of photography to the director to the music to the sound, even that crazy stuntman. I mean, Pee Wee Herman's stuntman in this film was nuts. I'm telling you, when he flips on that bike in the beginning and he's meant to do that, I watched that over and over again.
I remember rewinding that bit.
That is a brutal stunt.
I want to see
I meant to do that
scene where he's on the bike, the motorbike, and he goes through
he goes to the sign.
To the sign. I want to see that from the side. And
talk about that. They were like, that was a brutal stunt. I mean, when he's bull riding, I mean, his stunt, he had some really good stuntmen. And if it wasn't for that, physical stunts, no wires, no bullshit green screen, I mean, that was real. That was the real deal. And that sells it.
Although I do have to say, I'm pretty sure it was Pee-wee actually doing on the tequila dance up on tiptoes on 8-inch platforms. So that was pretty impressive.
That was him. He's very proud of it. And the ceiling was so low.
Did he do that without a wire?
No, he did the real dance.
Wow.
And the ceiling, when you're on the bar, it was so low. There's a really quick second where you see him go up and he actually smacks his head on the girder. And he talks about that. He was like, I didn't know it was that low.
So, once again, it just goes to show you that these films are really cool and important to talk about, even if it's not your most favorite film in the world. But this is film history right here. It launched a bunch of careers. It shows the professionalism of these people. They're dedicated to their craft, and they would take that and make other movies that are great that maybe you do love.
And also to a point that you brought up, the importance of these long-standing connections and collaborations, because if you get people who can work together it's just magic every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you have those personal relationships with people, people that might not be inclined to do something for scale will come in and do it because they know you and they like you and they trust you. So You know,
art first.
Yeah, getting a Phil Hartman, who at this time was big on SNL or was starting to make it big, to come in and do a bit piece, even though he was the one that wrote the movie, and that's big. Getting Cassandra Peterson to come out and do a bit piece, and she was blowing up as Elvira, is big, and that's because of personal relationships that she had, or personal relationships Phil Hartman had, with these people. So it's a big thing. Now, real quick before we go, I got to talk about the ending of the film. There's two aspects. So you could choose either one, A or B, or talk about both. But I'm going to talk about my favorite part, which is the Josh Brolin stuff in the film. I think it is the most hilarious satirical piece on what Hollywood continues to do to this day. When they say based on a true story, and we talked a little bit about this at Hidalgo. Based on a true story means that there might be 20% of it that's true and the rest is Hollywood. And they did that to Pee-wee's story.
You correctly phrased that by saying might be 20%.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hilarious. And the PW thing and come on over here. The bike's cooling off, but I'm not. I'm just like dying. I laughed at this week watching it. That part is the funniest part for me in the movie. And then I like everything leading up to it, where he sees everybody that he met on his road journey and they're watching the film. And I love that whole ending so much. I think it's fantastic. So that said, I wanted to get to each of you on either that ending, or you could talk about the stuff in the movie lot. So, but I'm going to go to Steve first, go around the horn, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So Steve, what did you think about how they wrap this thing up?
Yeah. I still haven't 100% seen like every frame, so I'm probably not the person that should describe this. But from what I had seen of it, I was pretty impressed by the stuff with the Godzilla thing. I'm just that looks like something that would have been filmed in the 70s. In Japan. So it's and Godzilla look realistic, and Mothra or whatever the other monster is look really good.
King Ghidorah.
King Ghidorah. It looked like something that you would have seen on a Mystery Science Theater 3000 type of film. So I will say that was really well done.
That was definitely 70s era Godzilla, where Godzilla got really derpy.
Go back and watch King Ghidorah versus Godzilla in the 70s, the actual Toho movies, and you will see a scene that looks exactly like that. Where King Ghidorah is coming in on a wire, slamming it.
Well, I love the fact that I can see the tanks being pulled on wires, because they're I'm an old school Godzilla fan, and I remember seeing the jets on wires, the little missiles on wires, and then later on they're throwing bottle rockets at the guys in the suits. The fact that they recreated that to a T was
last
a delight.
weekend,
and then Pee-wee riding on his bike in the middle of all that.
Last weekend, I watched 1955 in Japanese, Gojira. So I had to go back and watch it.
54.
In fact,
55 would have been the American release.
Yep. One of the movies I would love to do is the movie that the Magnificent Seven is based on. So, like the Japanese
Seven Samurai.
Yeah, Seven Samurai. Yeah. I would love to do that.
Kurosawa is
Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Toshiro Mifune.
I was also going to say 47 Ronin, but no. So, there are parts of it that I like, but most of that movie is utterly forgettable. But that's a whole other thing. Lance, the ending of the film.
Well, I gotta agree with you. When I seen the James Brolin and Morgan Fairchild bit, it just killed me. And then the redub voice of Pee Wee Herman,
yes.
and his regular voice. And from what I understand, that's their gaffer. They called him Froggy. His voice was like that, and they just had the gaffer redub the voice because it had that weird. That's a real voice. It's not a guy making it up. And just to discover that, just to go, no, this guy's voice. They said he looked like Clark Gable, but he talked like that.
Oh,
but the thing is, that's the beauty of collaboration. To get this guy, he can do it. This is going to be hilarious if he does it. And I think the funny aspect of the James Brolin and Morgan Fairchild aspect of it is, I think that's the only scene that dates the movie because of the hair, but it still works. It's
hair.
It still works. It still works all these years later, almost 40 years later. But I love that ridiculous ridiculous lacquered hairdo that didn't move when he's fighting ninjas. I thought it was just I was sold on it.
Her little electric blue satin jumpsuit.
Right.
Plus, I love the line from Pee Wee. He's like, "I don't have to watch the movie, Dottie. I lived it." You know?
The X1, and I love, and I'll say it. There's only two people that I've heard say, "I know you are, but what am I so awesome?" And it's James Brolin and Pee Wee Herman, because when he says that, it just killed me. And I remember that it was on network TV. Right when it was done, I ran to the video store. Okay, we're dating ourselves. This is 85, 88. I went to the video store. I picked it up and I ran over to my brother's apartment and I knocked on his door and I said, "You have to watch this movie."
All right,
I don't know about that.
I got to ask before we go to Jeff, and maybe because you've watched the commentary, everything, you can let me know. James Brolin and Morgan Fairchild at this time are huge names. Names. How the hell did they get them in this movie for a bit part?
You know what? It wasn't said, but I'm going to let you in on something really weird. Is that even though this is, you hear Pee Wee Herman say this is James Bond stuff, you know, when it came to Spike and Dottie, and then
I know where you're going with this.
I know where I'm going with this, because James Brolin actually interviewed, and there's footage of him auditioning for James Bond before Timothy Dalton got the part, and James Brolin is great. He's awesome. The problem should we make him American? Let's not. But he nailed it. And then when I seen this flick, I'm like, he is James Bond, but he's a better Pee Wee Herman. I think this was amazing. But, you know, who knows? I mean,
I would have totally watched this Pee Wee Herman movie as well. Like if they did the James Brolin Morgan Fairchild.
I agree with you. I thought of that.
I would watch the crap out of that.
That would have been just as great. So I don't know. And you're right. They were huge at the time. I mean, Capricorn 1. I mean, the list goes on. What James Brolin was doing and how they come and do. Who knows? Maybe it was a good day rate for those 2 days they were on this.
Sometimes you do things because you're a fan or you're a friend. I've watched an interview with Samuel Jackson talk about, like, if you see Sam Jackson in a crappy movie, that's because he's usually doing a favor for somebody. Like he's like, he believes in somebody and he just comes in for scale or maybe like just a day's work. He just takes a day and does it. And, you know, it's really great that people who are like that will be generous with their time and their fee, if that's the case. If you know, especially if they want to elevate somebody they think is going to be an up-and-comer.
I wish he hadn't done a favor for somebody and come back as sad sack Nick Fury in this latest show. Oops, did I say that? Sorry.
I was going to say that, but
Oh, sorry, that slipped out, folks. Over to you, Jeff. Cover up my mistake. So.
Yeah, that character feels a lot more like he belongs in the Hateful Eight.
Yes. So I'm going to pretend Fury died way back then. So.
All right, so I was about to make a Flurkin joke, but I'm not going to. All right, so we all love the Fairchild Brolin thing, so there's that. I'm going to get into the studio stuff because that was such a delight for me. I grew up in this period. I was born in '68, and I've always been a cinemaphile. And so I've watched movies from way back before my day on through, you know, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 90s, on through where I was growing up. So seeing that's why I was so disappointed not to see at least a quick cameo of Annette Funicello or Frankie Valli.
Yeah,
because they're doing the surfer bit, you know, over there, but they're nailing everything else.
I mean,
it looks
Frankie Avalon or
Frankie Avalon. Thank you.
Either one works.
So but it was so perfect, and it's like Lance and Steve are going on. The setup for Godzilla is so perfect. It does look like, you know, Monster Zero, the way the shot is filmed, including, you know, Godzilla hanging on, he's being pulled up, the things on the strings, the Santa Claus movie set, you know, it looked like a Lifetime original getting ready to go on, like, oh, you know, it's Christmas. And for somebody, like, I've never had the chance to go on the back lot, but I've watched a lot of stuff about the back lots in Hollywood. And I'm like, oh, I know where that is. Oh, I know where that is. Like, oh yeah, I remember that thing. Cause, you know, these sets stick around, at least on the lots. It's kind of a shame. There's sets are so disposable now. I do like the days where they would just kind of store sets and they'd recycle them and you'd use them again. You'd slap on a new coat of paint. But this was still part of the golden age of the studio system right here. And like the 80s was an incredible time for filmmaking. And so to see all this, and you may or may not know this, Pee-wee, when he had initially farmed out this idea, he wanted to do sort of a Pollyanna thing.
Yep.
And where he wanted to come to a town and he wanted to be this, fish out of water character who changes this very strict, almost Pleasantville-like sort of town. But he noticed that a lot of people rode around the lot on bicycles because the lots were so big. And he's like, you know what? Let's make it about a bike. And that was further inspired by a French film whose name I forget, which was about a father and son on this road trip to find their stolen bike because it was their source. Thank you. It was their source of income and livelihood. So, it's not just the fact that Tim Burton's bringing a lot of influences, but Paul Reubens himself is bringing a lot into this that, you wouldn't think that this comedic actor is so deep, but he is bringing so many interesting layers into all of this. You think he's like, oh, I'm the guy with the silly voice and the silly bow tie and the chair. And I will say, out of all the gadgets, I really wanted to see the boomerang bow tie.
It exists. It exists in a deleted scene.
Oh, okay. Because we got to see all the other gadgets. Like I was like, I want to see the boomerang bow tie.
And they could have fit that in the film because it was brief, but in a
if Brolin had used it, that would have been great.
Right, and it was when he was getting chased through a little ghost town, a western town, and he takes it off to use it as a distraction. It goes through a window and comes back, and they they use it. And having said that, the other scene that always confused me for decades, because this disc I have is the 20th year anniversary, is remember when he says, you have something to add, Amazing Larry? And it's like, we get a deleted scene where we get his backstory.
Oh, okay. Because Amazing Larry is just such a fun little standout character. He's so visually appealing. And I had to look up the actor to find out what other things he's been in, but he is best known for being Amazing Larry.
And the deleted scene in the magic shop with him, which could have worked. I think it was so brief they could have put it in, but they cut it out.
I think they had to. There was probably a hard time limit to 90 minutes, because it was marketed as a children's film, and back then, if you were a children's movie, you did not go over 90 minutes.
It would be nice it would have been nice if we could have gotten a director's cut DVD or Blu-ray one day. But
I would say the modern Blu-ray or this 20th year anniversary will answer a lot of questions because the commentaries are thorough. The commentaries are very thorough. Even the storyboards, the selection section they have on the art direction is in there. You got Danny Elfman. It answers all the Pee-wee questions. Now, not only that, but I remember in the original Pee-wee, remember he's pulling the chain out of his bike?
Yeah.
Yep. I wish I would have kept the original VHS version because the framing is off and you can see that it's empty on the bottom of the bucket, and you can see
he's got a big old hollow chain.
You see like only a fragment of it, and they cut it out on this. They reformat it so you don't see it, and they talk about it. And Paul Reubens blatantly asked Tim Burton, "Well, whose fault is that really?" And Tim Burton says, "Actually, it comes down to me. It was my fault because I should have framed that better. I had it framed better." But those little charms, plus when he's driving with the convict and you see the signs coming by, it was once again framed differently. They didn't frame out the pulley system pulling the signs. You can see it. Now, for some reason, the French thought it was avant-garde. The French thought it was on purpose. But really, they were mistakes cinematically.
But
French, what can you say? So?
That whole scene is so much fun. And you get this appreciation when you step onto a back lot of an active movie studio. Your space guys are walking by, knights in armor, cowboys, all kinds of craziness, like mimes, whatever. And the fact that he's got a backdrop that looks like the wall. He pulls a Bugs Bunny,
the old Bugs Bunny, that's great.
And it's so amazing because all of that stuff exists there, and I just love the whole magic of that.
And Yeah.
And the last thing is, I think of all my favorite of like going through the family of characters that he met along the way. I love him trying to give Mike the file and the foot-long hot dog.
Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic.
That's
Yeah.
just. And now here's something really, maybe a little bit
Or
of a
Mickey.
bonus.
That's
Mickey.
weird because he called him Mike. He's like, yeah, my name's Mike, and then after that they kept calling him Mickey. So I think it's a little slip.
Talking about the backlot of
Stephen
Warner
the Mickey?
Brothers. When I was there in '92, I made a short movie. It was a video, and I actually had a character generator. I was able to desaturate the colors on video. I shot it on VHS. This 10-minute movie. I'm not going to say the title because the person that was involved with me deserves no credit. This will never see the light of day. This video I shot, and Tim Burton Productions had just started. He just started his own production company, and he was officed at Warner Brothers. And this was the old days, 92, where you can buy the Hollywood Reporter Blue Book for $75, and it listed everybody's office numbers, locations, before the internet.
Wow.
So on a whim, I made copies of this short video I made, short movie. I called up Tim Burton Productions. It was in the book that I bought. Somebody answered the phone. I know the name of the person, and I just reconnected with this person out on LinkedIn, actually. And they answered the phone, hello. And I was like, Tim Burton Productions. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was supposed to say that. Tim Burton Productions, how can I help you? I said, well, I'm from Colorado, blah, blah, blah. I have this little flick that, showed on public access. It was kind of a hit. Back then, public access cable was a big deal before the internet. Really? Yeah, I thought maybe if Tim Burton, his team, whoever acquisitions wants to see it, I can drop it by. Yeah, here's our address. Oh, okay. I hopped in my Volkswagen.
Boy, it was a different world back then.
It was a different world. I raced down there in horrible traffic, 4:30 in the afternoon in Los Angeles. I can parallel park like a madman in my little Volkswagen's 1970 Volkswagen, so I didn't worry about it. But it was actually a back entrance of Warner Brothers. So I parked, and it was like derelict central, man. I was like, holy shit, where am I? Am I going to get rolled? I had my videotape. We're in 92. I looked like I was 16 years old, and I got out, and the address was like this gigantic door. It was just this huge door in a wall, because it was Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers but within that big door, there was a little tiny door. Like a little tiny door, and there was
that feels like the most Tim Burton thing ever, right?
Yeah,
there.
I'm telling you, it was already bizarre. But I bring your movie down. Okay, I'm here, and I'm pounding on that door. Boom, 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 and finally a security guard opens it. Hey, what are you doing? I said I got to drop a movie off for so and so. She does work here. Oh yeah, I know her. Come on in. I just walk in. It's only like 3 feet, and it's a counter, those counters you flip up. Mm-hmm. And there's another just wall with the door there. It was like just this little thing, alcove with the bar, and then open up and an in basket. And I was like, shit, they're not going to look at my stuff. I'm going to drop it in here. It's going to go right into the garbage can. You know what I mean? So I put it in the basket, walked out of there. The guard shut the door. That was it. I turned around and I said, well, that's surreal. I call a week later and I'm like, hey, this is so-and-so. I dropped the movie off. Did you happen to see it? She's like, yes, I saw it. Hey, this is really great. What did you shoot it on? I said, well, it's a big cheat. I did shoot it on VHS, and I desaturated it, and I add fake grain structure. This is before this digital age. Mm-hmm. I said, so it is video. It is not on film. And she said, hey, this is great and all, but really, we need to know that you can work on film. We need to know you can know color saturation, film stock, sync sound. So, we really can't do anything for you. I said, I will serve coffee on the set. Just let me in. And she's like, how old are you? Which is, I guess you can ask that question back then. I'm like, well, I just turned 21, I'm trying to get into things. She goes, well, this is really interesting. I'm going to pass it on to Tim Burton, but unfortunately, he's on vacation for a year in New York. He's taking a year off. I was like, come on, man.
It's pretty interesting you say that, because like that's how Eli Roth got in. He said there was nobody he wouldn't get coffee for, and he was just on set. And that reminds me, there's a scene where Pee-wee gets into the studio lot by pretending to be part of a crowd. And that's exactly what Spielberg did, so he could get on the movie lots and see how things were done.
But it was still like this fortress. It was this fortress that I went into, and, you know, that close.
It's not that world anymore, I'll tell you that. So.
It's not, but that close. And didn't work out, but there's my Tim Burton story, my Warner Brothers story, the back lot, which was literally the back lot. I mean, I tell you, it's just so clear in my mind, because the moment they said, get down here, we want to see that, I was racing like a madman through Los Angeles.
Did you have a couple of tumbleweeds roll by, like in that one scene in the film?
Almost. It was filthy. It was like a dirt pit and then the sidewalk. I remember that. There was like 5 feet of dirt.
You needed to do the Pee-wee Big Adventure knock.
I didn't.
That whole area down there with all the studios is weird too. It's like it's a bunch of enclaves down there. It used to be, you know, it was like individual castles, you know, fortresses in between,
built up from the 1920s and all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's weird because I read this book about this this apocalypse. It's like a superhero book, but it's set in LA. And one of like the fortresses that's holding out is an old movie studio that they can hold out against all the infected people and everything out in greater LA.
It was like a prison. You don't get in there unless you're invited. That wall goes all the way around. And I was like, I'm on the backside of Warner Brothers. It's
there are so many amazing stories about people who tried to get into the industry. I remember actor Stephen Furst, whose first big appearance was Animal House. He was a pizza delivery driver.
Yeah, he was on Babylon 5 for a long time, too.
Yes, exactly. He made sure his route was in the lots, was in the studios, and he would deliver pizza. And you open up your box of pizza, and there's his 8x10 claw.
Headshot. That's genius.
I've heard that story.
You do what you got to do, right?
Right. I mean, fun stuff. So, I mean, you know, all that kind of stuff kind of helps. You know, my attitude towards Pee-wee and Tim Burton, and this tiny degree, very small degree of separation. I was almost there, man. If he would have seen my flick, I would have been in.
I mean, you know, I can imagine his story is not too far off for yours, because, like, you know, here's a guy. He's part of this comic troupe, a bunch of people. None of these guys, they all want to get that sort of status and that recognition, but none of them know. You know, there's no guarantees, and they're just working their butts off, and they're doing whatever they can. And you know, he and Elvira are smart enough to develop these iconic characters, and that's how they found their in. You know, and it's all about finding your in. And once you find your in, the brilliance of these two people, especially, I think, is the fact that they did it on their terms. They managed to keep their terms throughout their careers.
Right. I will say real quick before we close up, though. I mean, it's like that with anything. It's like that even in athletics to a certain extent. I was a swimmer, and, you know, I got to a certain level. But as my coach used to say all the time, you know, he's like, being successful at anything and being successful in swimming and sports, it's 98% hard work. And then the 2% is luck and talent, you know, and natural talent. And it's like, for whatever reason, I'm not born 6'2", you know, with a Michael Phelps wingspan. And so it didn't really matter how much hard work I put in, and I didn't have that luck. But you know what? That doesn't take away from what you did. So I would say that to all you creatives out there.
You could have been the Spud Webb of swimming.
Right. And, you know, and expanding on that just briefly, in the way of this person that I dropped the movie off to as time progressed, you know, nothing was going to happen. But I'd say I got some really good advice from this person, which was, get out of here, go back to Denver and make your movie. Do not do it here. I heard that several times from several big names, and I just said, all right, I just got to listen. I don't think they're protecting me from anything, but if you have the resources, Do not make your movie here, they told me.
Well, and best of all, you took your shot, and there's a lot of people who don't take their shot.
Okay. And I'll say it to a lot of people out there, no matter what endeavor you're in. So, I mentioned sports. There are people who can overcome the physical deficiencies or whatever. But even with writing or art, it's like, don't let other people validate how good your stuff is, because being successful does not always we've said this many times, is not emblematic of how good your stuff is. Being successful is a bunch of other stuff that goes with it, which means being in the right place at the right time, having it be seen, striking while the iron's hot, being in vogue. If you make a horror movie today, you may not be successful because horror movies aren't a big thing right now.
You guys know I'm big into martial arts film, and I was watching some interviews. People are talking about why hasn't people like Tony Jaa and Scott Adkins really taken off to be the next big martial arts star? Mm-hmm. And the guy they were talking to says, I really feel like it's a matter of branding. And what did Pee Wee Herman accomplish in spades? Branding.
Absolutely.
He branded himself. He set himself apart, and he wrote it all the way to the end.
And he owned it.
But don't let any of that stop you from taking your shot, because your stuff may be discovered a year later. It might be discovered after you die. And, that's not ideal for you, but, be creative, do your stuff. There are a number of people infinitely more talented than any of us here on screen, like a Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, who never had fame and fortune in their life, and then
Lovecraft didn't either. He took off later.
Edgar Allan Poe.
He died 3 months.
Yeah.
So you're right. This is take your shot. No excuses. Like Pee Wee Herman said, everybody's got a big butt. Tell me about your big butt.
Yeah. So go out there and do it.
Some lessons to be learned from this film.
And take satisfaction and professional satisfaction out of doing the best thing you can and growing all the time as an artist. I think that's a big thing,
Absolutely.
So, yep. So with that, I want to thank my co-host so much. This has been another great episode. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a movie that I think I probably would have checked out again if we weren't doing the show, but I am glad that I did, because I didn't even remember that Tim Burton and Danny Elfman were involved with this movie. And seeing, how they developed and how they became what they are, that first film that really put them on the map was a really interesting experience. So I'm glad I did it. And of course, we have to respect Paul Reubens, who gave everything into that role and made it famous for years.
And don't forget, we're going to be doing part 2 of our Paul Reubens, look back, our retrospective with Mystery Men next week. So make sure you tune in for that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Lance.
Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Jeff Bracey.
Paul Reubens is dead.
Yes.
But Pee Wee Herman will live forever.
Absolutely.
Amen. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Cinema Crusaders. Make sure you watch next week, same bat channel, same bat time, as we go into Mystery Men, also starring Paul Reubens, among many others, who include Ben Stiller and Jeffrey Rush, and there's a lot of names I'm going to forget, but we're going to talk about them next week. Make sure you check that out. Until then, make sure you keep that popcorn warm, find a nice comfy chair to sit in this weekend, and go watch yourself some films. We'll talk to you next week on Cinema Crusaders. We're out of here, everyone. Bye-bye.